So thank you very much, everybody. I would like to thank, first of all, the BYU Center for International Studies of Law and Religion for inviting me to speak here in this symposium. Actually, I must say that this is quite a record. David can correct me, because this is, for me, the second year in a row speaking. So it's quite a record. I'm actually speaking in the same panel, because last year I was in a similar panel signaling what David was saying in his introduction, that this topic is really growing, and there is a growing interest on this kind of a conversation. And then let me thank also the BYU students. As a former adjunct professor here at BYU for the last couple of years, every year I admire the work they do on this symposium, and I mean, we should really be thankful to all of them for their dedication to the cause of religious freedom. And then, of course, I would like to thank Professor Cole Durham and all the staff of the center for what they do all over the world, every day, night and day, I must say, for also helping us that in our part of the world try to work on the topic of freedom of religion, relationship between church and state, and so on. Now, as you have heard from the other two speakers, they actually did a lot of the job I was planning to do, so they saved the time for me, so I can elaborate more on other points. I'm very happy about that, and so thank you very much for the kind of topic you touched on. What I would suggest, first of all, I would like to outline a basic methodological issue. I mean, the title of the panel is Religion and Foreign Policy, and I would like to make a distinction here, a distinction between religion and foreign policy and religious freedom and international affairs. Now, I am probably the only lawyer in this panel, and this for me is quite important because I see a difference in there. I mean, there is a growing interest on religion and foreign policy. Religion and foreign policy for me touches every kind of topic where religious groups are important actors in foreign policy, and these not only concern the right to freedom of religion or belief. Religious groups are important actors in foreign policies on several issues and several topics of agenda. Think about development aid or this kind of stuff that many religious groups do abroad. I mean, I consider that also to be part of the study of religion and foreign policy, because religious groups are very important actors also in that field. While my presentation today will be mainly focused on what I define as religious freedom and international studies, because there is, as you have heard from the other two presentations, a growing interest on what religious freedom does at international level, how is it protected, and who are the actors. So my presentation will be really focused on the second part of that methodological division I would suggest. And in a kind of biblical spirit, not with no pretense to be a kind of lawgiver, I would suggest a kind of a pentalogue. So 5 issues I would like to suggest. So let me mention all of them, so that this is what I can anticipate what could be for you the takeover from this remaining 10 minutes of my presentation. So here are my 5 points, which are mainly taken from publications I have been doing, and on a pending article I maybe will submit for this issue of the symposium. So the first point, international religious freedom is nowadays part of a global conversation and a global struggle. I will elaborate on this point. Second point, within this global environment, there are several political platforms that often operate jointly, and this is often seen in coalition made at the UN level. Third point, religious freedom is not, I want to underline, not value neutral. We should struggle for what we believe it is true. And I mean, what we believe it is true, I think it's an important point that I will elaborate when I will deal with the third point. Fourth point, religious freedom is not, let me stress again, not a privileged right. And my last point, and I hope will be not the last one really, religious freedom is a right at a serious risk of disappearance. So let me go back to the first point. International religious freedom is nowadays part of a global conversation and a global struggle. You have heard from the other two speakers, mainly I would define a Western perspective of religious freedom, and there is a reason for that, because they have been talking about what the US has done from 1998 with the International Religious Freedom Act, how action came recently, especially from 2013, with the approval of the EU guidelines for freedom of religion or belief. But what I want to suggest with my first point is that the real conversation and struggles are much global. I mean, the only actors are not only Western countries, but the issue of religious freedom nowadays is really a global issue with global actors. Think about the relevance of the right to religious freedom and how we define that right, for instance, vis-a-vis the actions of the Russian Federation of the Russian Orthodox Church. Think at this about the organization of the Islamic Conference at the UN level. Think at this what is going on, for instance, in India, and how the issue of conversion is a burning issue in India. Or think about the issue of religious freedom in China, and how religious freedom is often suppressed, and people are not allowed to freely profess their religion. And again, this is really an indirect connection with my second point. What we can see nowadays, and especially but not like directly endorsing a kind of anti-Antonian view, kind of part of civilizational platform on where states where they stand on the right to freedom of religion and belief. And we have seen this many times. So, for instance, the US and Europe were allied on the so-called blasphemy resolution saga at the UN. The blasphemy resolution saga is over several years, the Organization of the Islamic Conference has proposed the approval of the UN blasphemy resolution, and at the UN level, the US, especially the US Commission on International Religious Freedom and the European Union, fought strongly to avoid the approval of the blasphemy resolution, because they thought that that would be contrary to the notion of religious freedom that we have, which is a right that belongs to individuals and not to ideas. So you should be free to criticize ideas in the name of human rights, and religion were understood as part of ideas. And many countries would object to that, because for them, you don't have a right to freedom of expression in criticizing the religion as an idea. So at the UN level, we see many of these platforms, a coalition among different states of the world on several issues that really shapes the definition of the right to freedom of religion or belief. And because my predecessors here from this podium have spoken about the US and the European Union, I would like to focus on that, because I really think that there is a kind of, what we know that yesterday was approved, the Trans-Pacific Partnership on the liberalization of the economy from the US and Asian countries, and there is a pending treaty on the so-called TTIP, Transatlantic Partnership. And what I would suggest is that what is going on is that there is really a kind of a transatlantic partnership for the promotion and protection of freedom of religion or belief. There are, nevertheless, three things to be said in this respect. US and Europe have different internal approaches to the protection of the right to religious freedom, but they are, interestingly enough, working together at the global level. There are, of course, still things that need to be worked out. Even at the terminological level in official documents, sometimes there is disagreement between the US and Europe on how we should call and define religious freedom. If we go through the official document, we would find sometimes the notion of religious freedom, sometimes religious liberty, sometimes freedom of religion or belief. Behind this kind of can be very tricky legal terminology, I would suggest that there are substantial differences to be addressed that flow from different understanding of the right at stake. What US and Europe also should do, and I think we have seen also from today's presentation, is that if they want to promote the right to freedom of religion and belief, they should enlarge the coalition of states that promote their vision of freedom of religion and belief, because in a kind of post-colonial setting, many of the actions of the US and the European Union are sometimes understood as a kind of colonial imposition of a given right, the given notion of the right to freedom of religion and belief on third states. And actually, I must say that it is, this allows me to go to my third point. It is true that the US and European Union have a kind of given notion of the right to freedom of religion and belief, and we should not deny that, because that is part of our history and a part of who we are. Now, Let me elaborate, because I think this is kind of a very important issue to underline. The right to freedom of religion or belief, as you understand it, and this is codified in international convention, does not come from nowhere. We should not forget that before the approval of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the mainstream understanding of the right focused on a regime of minority rights, which was very much focused, as Samuel Mones recently put it in his recent publication, collective, practical, and political dimension of religious affiliation. On the contrary, as recently demonstrated by genealogical reconstruction of the approval of Article 18 of the Universal Declaration by Linde Lindqvist, the post-war documents focused on individual conscience and individual consensus choice. To this respect, the approval of Article 18, I would suggest, was unprecedented as far as the history of humanity was at that time. And in fact, this definition was heavily influenced by Christian personalism in order to emphasize spiritual freedom. As Moyne underlines at the time of the convention, the right to change your religion was really unprecedented and strongly motivated by the perception of threat to historic missionary activity. In fact, several Muslim states abstained during the vote at the General Assembly. Therefore, I mean, we should really be aware of this fact that the fact that Article 18 grants the right to change your religion was, first of all, unprecedented at that time, and is still very contested in many parts of the world. Now, shall we just forget about defending the right to change your religion because other people in other countries do not believe in that? I think we should not, because that is part of who we are. And I think that from a universalist perspective, it's an important right to be defended. And you should have your right to change your religion and the right to leave the religious group in which you are. Now, there have been several critiques addressed to the right to freedom of religion or belief. We have seen this in the first presentation in the plenary session by Professor David Liddell. And we see that, especially when international religious freedom is at stake, there are several critiques addressed to the right to freedom of religion and belief. Some of these critiques are instrumentalization and politicization of religious freedom because religious freedom is used as a proxy for something else, US unilateralism versus multilateralism, not universal, religious freedom is not a universal concept. Religious freedom is a privileged right as compared to other rights. I would suggest that there are certain degrees of truth in some of those critiques. For instance, we know religious freedom as any other human rights, I want to underline this, as any other human rights, can be the object of instrumentalization and politicization. Then, I thought it was for me, sorry. Then there is an issue with multilateralism and unilateralism, but we also know that, you know, when you look at the UN Council for Human Rights, and you look at the states who are supposed to protect human rights, can you really claim that multilateralism is better than unilateralism? Of course, I would suggest that it's good that there are more and more states involved in the promotion and protection, but sometimes we should not overemphasize the role of multilateralism. And as I have already worked on this issue of not universal concept as far as religious freedom belief is concerned, and I want to suggest that religious freedom, if we look at the policies that are at stake, is not as privileged as other human rights, because if we look at for instance, one clear indicator, the amount of money which is spent on the promotion and protection of religious freedom of belief, you would find very easily which is much lower as compared to the amount of money which is spent on the promotion and protection of other rights. Just to conclude, and my final point, because otherwise David will cut me down, religious freedom is at risk of disappearance. I would say that there are 5 main points because of that. And I won't elaborate on that, but I will leave that for the Q&A session. So there is, of course, an issue with the amount of resources that are devoted to the protection of the right to freedom of religious belief, which is, believe me, not very high as compared to, I can elaborate on the exact amount that the US and Europe spend on this. Then there is an issue, I mean, especially the Western world, we are nowadays a post-Christian society. And therefore, when you think about and discuss about issues related with religion and religious freedom, I would suggest that there is a kind of cognitive block. I mean, people that don't care about religion and religious freedom, it's very tough to explain to them why and how this is relevant. And this is particularly true when you deal with high-level bureaucracies. They usually are composed by people that are, on average, quite secular or secularized people. I mean, if you go down to Foggy Bottom or if you go to Brussels, I can tell you that the majority of people are, average secular people, and it's very hard to explain to them why religion or religious freedom is irrelevant. Then there is an issue of clashing of rights. I mean, because there is not only the right to freedom of religion which is protected, but there are, or any kind of other rights. And the classical clash nowadays is, of course, we should not deny that the clash that is everywhere between religious freedom on one side and LGBT rights on the other side. And then, final point to conclude, there is the incoherence from pretended supporters of the right to freedom of religion and belief. And the example was made before by both speakers. I mean, you can claim that you are for religious freedom, that you protect religious freedom, and then at every single occasion you have to remark that right, you just to pretend to, to put more value on other issues than the right to freedom of religion and belief. This has happened constantly with the Gulf countries. This has happened constantly. And if you think about the International Religious Freedom Act in 1998, there was only one person sanctioned under that act, that was Narendra Modi. And Narendra Modi was very much welcomed in the US when he came last year, and he gave a great tour and so on. So even pretended supporters of the rights, many of the time pretend to put more value on other issues than the right to freedom of religion and belief. Therefore, I would suggest, of course, that we are all involved in a very complex conversation and discussion. We should aim at having as global and large possible partnership as we have, but we should not forget that there are certain things that we can really claim that are universal, such as that nobody can be jailed or persecuted because he changes his religion or because what he believes. Thank you very much for your attention.